There's a bright line between stupidity and random variation.
Hello and welcome to Expected Own Goals. Are we stupid edition? I am your host, Eric Morgan.
I'm Evan Davis. I'm going to go ahead and say no, we are not, though we may have gotten a few things wrong in our preseason analysis. It's a moment that we've been waiting for all season. Week 9, after 9 regular season NWSL games, is generally the point at which some underlying numbers that we like to use start to stabilize and look a little bit stickier and quote-unquote more real than they had earlier in the year. And so we always like to use this point in the season to take a step back and evaluate how things are going, what teams might have surprised us, what teams might be doing exactly what we thought they would, and whether or not these teams' performances are real. So joining us for this very mega episode is one of our old friends. You heard her on a couple of our season preview episodes, and she used to be the head of analytics at Angel City FC and currently still writing for The Guardian?
Yes.
Beautiful. Kim McCauley, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very excited to have you here, Kim. Kim was with us for our Portland and our North Carolina previews, 2 teams that I think have surprised a little bit, but we're going to use the structure of my preseason rankings. It's sort of a wash between Evan and I, but we're going to use my preseason rankings going from bottom to top. We're just sort of going to talk about how real or not real these teams are and where we think our priors are right or wrong about these teams as they've gone. So structure is I'm reading off my preseason rankings and y'all are going to be in for a little bit of a laugh at points. All right. So bottom team, Chicago, 14th. Is this correct? Are they the worst team in the league?
I throw it to you, Kim.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a little bit of a debate here, maybe. I think there is a potential case to be made for Utah at least being more disappointing. I guess it's pretty clear that Chicago is the worst team in the league. It's the debate is more, is Chicago or Utah the more disappointing team relative to our expectations? But yeah, I think that Chicago is not just last place standing, but negative 14 goal differential kind of tells the story of what's going on here. You guys have talked quite a bit on this show if the firing of Lauren Donaldson was justified, or if, responsibility rests more with the GM or owners. I think when your team is this poor, you've got to say everybody bears a little bit of responsibility and nobody's doing their job.
Yeah, I think I agree with that in general. It's interesting that they are 13th on expected points, obviously last on actual points. And our buddy Trevor Larner produces an ELO projection model for the NWSL, pegs Chicago to be the worst team by the end of the season as well, pegging them for 19 points at this point. Here's what's interesting. Through 9 games, they have produced a negative 0.4 non-penalty XG differential per game, which isn't good, but it is not the disaster you might think it would be given everything else that we've just cited. So I don't know quite what to make of that.
Yeah, I think the question is in relation to the expectation of them being the worst team and maybe clearly the worst team in the league. I think the answer is they are not clearly the worst team in the league. The performance is what the table says right now is, yeah, maybe. But I think structurally, they don't have the excuse that Utah has about just never being able to roll out their best lineup.
That's it.
I think this is a team that is several pieces away from being competitive, that have huge issues kind of all the way across the field. And without Mallory Swanson, which was sort of the question mark we had before preseason, now having been thoroughly answered that she won't be back, this team feels maybe more dead in the water than any other team 9-10 games in, as opposed to, say, Utah, who I think can draw a fair amount of talent as it gets healthy back into their lineup and improve just based on the pieces they have. At least improve to being the clear 13th best team in the league, if not a good team. For the aesthetic side of it as well, or the non-number side of it, they play really awful football to watch, and they have management that seems really toxic. So spiritually, I think 14th in the league is maybe also correct.
I think we should talk a little bit about the awful football to watch for it, because the fact that they haven't changed at all is like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm reading into, trying to read the tea leaves here. Obviously, I don't actually know this, but looking at, they fire their manager, they fire Lord Donaldson, the GM, in multiple interviews, in both a public press conference and in a exclusive interview at the Equalizer, basically says the same thing, doubles down on, we think we have the players to play a more possession control oriented style of play. The message is very clear to the interim manager, Masaki Hemi. Like, we don't like the way that we were playing before. We think we can play a different style of football. He goes and doubles down. Basically, they're playing basically the same style, but maybe even more defensive, more conservative than they were under previous management. Kind of reflects, I don't know, a lack of respect for your boss. When from Hemi's point of view, when your boss is doing public interviews saying, we need to completely change our style of play, we have the players to play a more expansive style, and you are then getting more defensive than your predecessor? What the heck is going on with this club?
Yeah, and there are moments when you do see Chicago wanting to step up a little higher when they're out of possession and try and, effect some level of counter pressure that just was never present under Donaldson. And this is something that I find really, really interesting. So the way that I kind of use a proxy for pressing, at least with the way that plus could be a tool, is to just look at a team, how much offense the team allows in the attacking third and the attacking half, right? So Chicago is 4th place this season in G+ allowed in the attacking third, which on its face would say, oh wow, they're actually like maybe engaging in some pretty effective levels of pressure. But this is where it all falls apart. They're 4th place in G+ allowed in the attacking third. They are 11th in G+ allowed in the attacking half, which tells me that maybe they can actually slow your pressure down high up. But if you break that first line, it's over.
Oh, yeah.
And you see the lack of coordinated talent that's on the pitch, that anytime they do want to play a little bit more open or do want to play a little bit more aggressively, it doesn't work. And Hemi probably now feels like he's got enough evidence in his iPad at this point to say, no. I think maybe with the players we've got, Donaldson might have the right idea, and I might even have to just amp that up, to 11 in order to make sure that we don't piss away goals. Doesn't seem to have changed much on the results or on the performance front, no matter how you slice it in these last 3 games.
Just because Chicago have scored goals in these games shouldn't blind anyone to the fact that they still have no semblance of an offense. I think we tweeted out that, they've generated less than 0.8 XG in 6 of their 9 results.
And that specifically, those 6 games are the ones where they have not scored any goals.
Yeah, it's so dire. And I think I don't have a problem sticking Chicago in 14th and saying, well, maybe it's a coin flip with a team that's really missing some pieces. So 14th, I feel like, is a very real place for Chicago right now. Does anybody have any pushback? Do they? Anybody even want to make the straw man argument that they're 12th?
Absolutely not.
No.
I'm quite comfortable saying that 14th is place. I'm quite comfortable saying that 14th place is real.
But like we mentioned up top, there's certainly a case for Utah being on their level. Like if we did this tier list style instead of number style, I think we'd put them in the same bottom tier.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. All right, next up, we've got Houston in my preseason ranking. I think the preconception that a lot of us had, and I'll speak for Evan and Kim, you can not be victim to what I'm about to say, is that essentially 13 through 5 were going to be pretty movable and that wherever you ranked in there, like there were teams we felt better about in that set, but it was a pretty mushy middle. I think Houston at 13, are they the bottom of the middle? Yeah, I think that's maybe fair. Does the middle no longer include Utah? Probably also fair. And that 5 through 12 is sort of a mushier, maybe even higher up than that is mushier. But yeah, so Houston 13th. Is that too harsh?
I didn't think it was too harsh preseason. Obviously now, we know that the Utah who you had above them is clearly worse. But I think that where they are in the table is about where they are talent-wise, where they are on underlying numbers. So I don't think your preseason prediction was unfair. I do think that what Fabrice Gautreau and Angela Hucles have done in the short time that they've been with this team has been mostly positive stuff, though. Like, even though Houston isn't playing well, even though I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, you can see some signs of progress. I think that the things that they're doing make sense. The way that they play is like there's a coherent system in place. The new players that have come in have added something to the team. I think they were just starting from a place, and this speaks to your preseason prediction, where they probably had the least raw talent in the league. I think they have a big group of players who are NWSL quality players who deserve to be on a roster, but the high-end talent just isn't there. And there are so many games where Houston has 8 or 9 players on the field where I'm like, for most teams in the league, that player's a good backup.
And yet here they are sitting 8th in expected points, 6th in non-penalty XG differential. They've played Washington, they've played Gotham, they've played Kansas City. They lost to Kansas City 2-0, and yet I think contained Chemwa Chawinga to something like less than 0.15 XG on the day or something. They managed to draw 0-0 to Gotham. Like, they've not had an easy schedule up to this point, and somehow have still managed to create performances that suggest at least some semblance, maybe to your point, Kim, of stability, of incremental improvement.
A couple weeks ago, they won away to Seattle, and it was not a pretty game. I think they had, they had 3 shots. So it's not like it was this incredible attacking performance. But man, once they got a lead, they held that lead. Like, they were defensively solid, and Seattle couldn't create anything.
For me, and we went deep on it for the Patreon sickos. We did a whole episode on Houston and sort of what we thought about Houston. So I'm not going to repeat too much of what's there, other than to say no team to me has committed more to low variance games, to essentially creating very little in attack and in turn allowing very little from opposition going forward. They have been really good at essentially limiting opponents' opportunities and only at the cost of creating any sort of offense. But that's allowed them to stay in a lot of games and sort of squeak out some semblance of results. Irony of ironies that they do this to the other team in the league in Seattle and walk away with a victory. But like, Houston is really, I think there's a fair amount of self-knowledge evident in the way in which they are playing, and there's a cohesion there, but it is an admission that they are probably not incorrectly, based on the actual table, the 12th best team in the league right now. Like, they have the 12th most talent, and they are doing everything they can to overperform it.
That game is against Seattle is a very funny one, because you look at Houston's roster and style of play, and they kind of feel like Seattle from AliExpress, and yet they were able to out Seattle.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think also the 4-1 loss to Portland last weekend maybe flatters Portland to a certain extent, both between the penalty and a little bit of finishing luck. So, not to mention the own goal is the only thing that they were able to come away from it. I think it makes the performance look worse from Houston. So I think that you're right, Kim. I think that they are still probably playing at a talent deficit in basically 95% of their matches this season. But this is maybe the one area where it seems like coaching is actually having some sort of positive effect. And so you're not necessarily going to finish 12th, but maybe you'll finish, when all is said and done, maybe 9th or maybe even scrape into a playoff place. And I don't say that because they would deserve it, but just because of the structure of the playoff system, that maybe that could happen.
There are some teams that we're going to talk about here where I felt like their coaches are just throwing darts.
Yeah.
Like when we get to Utah, I think that's like, the coach is throwing darts, mostly because they haven't had all their players available. Whereas you watch Houston and it's like, oh, every single player who's on the pitch right now knows what their responsibility is.
Right.
And the transition moments from, when they go from out of possession to in possession, and, sometimes they change shape between the phases, like everybody knows what they're doing.
Right.
And you can tell that it's not a situation where the coach is like, oh, we just got to get the 11 best players on the field and like hope that's enough. Like, no, there's a very clear, coherent plan, and it's usually not the most sexy, interesting plan. A lot of times it's, standard 4-3-3 low to mid block, like just don't do anything stupid, but it's not a bad way to play when you have the roster that Houston has.
It's to tie it all together. It's a don't lose strategy, not a play to win to strategy. Maybe.
I think it's just, again, I think it isn't that. I think it's limit chances and let the dice, and like, let's see if we can catch Delaney Sheehan rockets from outside the box, or let's just make sure that our opposition isn't getting 15 shots on target a game in the way that like Angel City might open you up to a high variance game. It's really play the grindiest, controlliest game and bring down the talent level on the opposition to our level, force them to play a game that looks more like ours. I think the one thing that actually really concerns me about Houston after the Portland result is, sure, that scoreline flatters Portland and they got some finishing luck, but Houston created absolutely nothing for the first 60 minutes of that game. And like, until they were already trailing by a ton, I worry about them against teams that can basically just flat track bully and outmuscle them. They were good against Gotham earlier in the season, but Portland, who is like a mid-table team with talent right now, maybe even a little above that, I think showed what just raw numbers in the middle of the park and playing with wingers that stretch out Houston can do. And I actually thought Portland sort of presented a handbook for like beating this iteration of Gautreau Houston. And I'll be curious to see if like Houston, who have been very solid, continue being very solid, because I'm not like all the way on board with buying them at their expected points level yet. Speaking of Portland, a team who just drilled them, that's who I have ranked 12th.
Wow.
Now, was I being a downer homer? By the way, Kim, it doesn't look better for you. You have them 11th, and Evan had them 12th, and ASA preseason had them 11th, and Larner's ELO model preseason had them 12th. This one, I think we can all agree, was really just a byproduct of like the uncertainty of going into a season without Weaver, without Wilson, without fullbacks, and not understanding what they were going to do with the young attacking talent they brought in.
I know you're being playful when you say the whole like were we stupid thing, but like what you just laid out is the reason why I don't think any of us were being stupid when we picked them where we were, because it's insane. It would be insane to say that they were 5th based on that lineup going into the start of the year. Like the fact that they're 5th and the fact that they're 2nd on expected points, 5th on XG differential, like this is a genuine surprise, I think, for everybody involved. Maybe even for the players, too, frankly.
When we recorded that episode, we were very much like in our feelings about Sophia Wilson announcing that she was out for the season. If anybody was not listening then or does not remember, we recorded the Portland episode where we were all like, yeah, they're probably going to finish around 6th. And then literally the next day it was announced that Sophia Wilson wasn't going to play. And then we had to re-record the episode, and we were
That's correct.
They're screwed. This changes everything. And I mean, I think that's a fair reaction to a maybe top 3 player in the league announcing that she will not be playing this season. But, when we talked about what is the case for this team still being a playoff team, still being not just a playoff team, but like a top 5 or 6 team, it was, man, they've got a lot of high variance young forwards here. They've got a lot of young forwards who we don't know a lot about. Either they don't have a lot of data in the league, or there's a pretty good explanation for why they looked bad last season. They've got a few rookies. It's not, if you squint and look at the roster, it's not hard to envision a situation where 2 or 3 of these young strikers are really good, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
Who for you has really stood out among the crowd in Portland this year?
So we didn't talk that much about Kaya Hanks in that episode. I kind of, we talked about...
It was a late signing. I think the signing just happened.
Yeah, I'm not convinced we had enough time to even process the Kaya Hanks signing. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, like we talked about why we thought Rylan Turner or Pietro Tordian might exceed expectations and be really good players for this team. We didn't really talk about Kaya Hanks. Kaya Hanks looks fucking legit.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as a service provider right now, that may actually be the area where she's providing even more value than some of the shooting. I mean, she had that big announcement game. What was that? Who were they playing when that game happened?
She blew the doors off against Gotham. Yeah, against Gotham, she had 42 touches, a goal, an assist, created 0.7 XG and 0.3 XAG. So yeah, she had a game. And I kind of feel like she is such a talented person at carrying the ball into dangerous positions that I kind of hadn't anticipated. And I think some of it is defenders just haven't had a great look at her yet. There's not like appropriate tape, but she's also just crafty and clever. And you can see it in the goal she scores against Houston. Puts the opposition on skates, pulls back, picks her place, shoots, scores. I feel like Kaya Hanks has been fantastic. I actually think for me, the Portland breakout player is just Olivia Moultrie back to form. Mm-hmm. And we were so concerned with how Olivia Moultrie was going to sort of figure in here. And I'm not sure that they've answered what's her best position, but they found a way to get her the ball centrally a fair amount in this sort of winger central half space attacker. And she's just been pretty devastating.
For me, Moultrie has been the key to unlocking a lot of this, that she feels much more settled and much more comfortable than she did last season, playing more like the player we probably thought she would be in 2024 when she was supposed to be given the keys to the car. And so if she can keep that up, I mean, she's putting up 0.22 expected assists per 96 at the moment, which is quite excellent. To go back to the forwards thing, it's interesting that I think Hanks's highlight reel is pretty undeniable. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that it's, G+ doesn't necessarily think she's been a bad dribbler or a bad carrier of the ball. 0.05 dribbling above positional average per 96 is like a solid figure for a winger. But it's not necessarily like, taking over headlines levels of statistical output the way that, say, like Alyssa Thompson or Banda or Chewinga can do. And I wonder if we're still maybe in there's room for high variance kind of zone with a lot of these young players. Like Hanks has played a lot, obviously, nearly 600 minutes, but we've only got 220 minutes on Pietro Tordian, 370 on Mimi Aladu, and even 592 minutes. I mean, that's 592 professional career minutes total for Kaya Hanks. I wonder if maybe there is going to see some measure of regression in terms of their top line output as the season goes on. Am I wrong about that?
I'm concerned that this team is going to be streaky in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. They've gotten some incredible goalkeeping out of Mackenzie Arnold too, who's now injured. Not that, Bella Bixby's a backup anybody in this league would love to have as their backup, but It doesn't change the fact that Arnold's been one of the best shot stoppers in the league early in the season, and now she's injured.
For sure.
And then, their back line too has been, there's been some games where they've been better than we'd expect, and there have been games where they've had meltdowns.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everything about this team, besides the midfield, which has a lot of experienced players that we have, plenty of seasons of data on, the other parts of the team seem like super high variance. But the midfield certainly, I guess we can say a bright spot, because they're definitely better than we all thought they were going to be.
As we have seen, Hina, though she's a little more liberated, in a pseudo double pivot a lot of the time with Sam Coffey, that's just putting two of your best players in the center of the park and asking them to manage games. And they've done that really well. And I think that's really cut down on other areas in which there could have been trouble. I think that their influence there has been great. Just to go back to Kaya Hanks is third in the league in box touches per 96.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she is getting herself in crazy. She's above Alyssa Thompson. She's above Rachel Kundananji. She's above Temwa Chawinga in terms of like getting into the box. So when you ask whether I think that certain things are going to fade over the year, her 0.27 non-penalty XG, her 0.18 XA per 96. So that's like a half goal creation a game, a little bit less than that. With those number of box touches, no, I kind of don't think that I'm like inclined to say I think she's maybe actually very real. And if it's going to taper off, I don't think it's going to taper off a ton, just because she is so consistently good at getting herself in really dangerous positions to both create and score. So like Kaya Hanks on a team where like we should not underestimate the value of just getting neutrality out of Dana Castellanos if you're going to play her. You know, like we were very concerned about that. The Portland is basically just fielding plus attackers. Rylan Turner is one of two players above Kaya Hanks in box touches per 96. She's at 6.7. Like, in a lot of ways, they have gotten bizarro Wilson Weaver out of Hanks and Turner. We did not anticipate getting 80% of the production of those two from two replacement attackers. And Portland kind of is. So I'm inclined to say that like they're not the second best team in the league, but they may well be the fifth best team in the league. Where are you guys?
I think that fifth place is not real. I'm maybe more convinced that they are a playoff caliber team now. Fifth just feels high. And I totally hear you that like box touches gives maybe more weight to a player like Hanks's production. On the other hand, you know, it's being driven entirely by dribbling rather than by receiving, which is always something that I want to keep an eye on, especially for a player that young with that little amount of playing time as a professional. So I can buy your argument, but I'm maybe just a little bit more skeptical than fifth. So I'm going to say they're not real.
So when you said, fifth seems a little bit high, first reaction in my head is I agree. And then I looked at the table and I looked at the teams below them. And I think I have bigger questions about all of them than I do about Portland.
Yeah, Kim, I'm with you. This is where I didn't think fifth would be this broken a team. And Portland feels least broken among their cohort.
Right.
Bizarrely enough. And like, yeah, I sort of throw my hands up. But again, like Kaya Hanks is seventh in non-penalty XG plus XA 96 in the league.
It's funny thinking like, and I can't believe we're here saying this, but the real decisive thing for Portland might be whether or not they have the guts to just go all in on Kaya Hanks as our starter, Dina Castellanos is on the bench.
That's got to be something they're debating. Like Kaya Hanks is turning in really consistent performances. They have two of the top 7 attackers in the league. Where are they currently in the NWSL table? They're fourth or fifth?
They're currently fourth.
They're second on expected points. They're fourth on points. I'm inclined to say that fourth, fifth is not crazy.
All right. Who is next?
All right. Next on the how bad did preseason go is San Diego, who preseason 11th. Evan had 13th. The Larner Elo model had 11th. And ASA, and I want to give credit here, had them 8th. The model bought more than we bought. Kim, where were you on San Diego to start the season?
I was probably closer to you guys. I don't have a full 1 through 14. I didn't do a full 1 through 14 preseason predictions, but somewhere in the 10th, 11th range is what I think I would have said.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wrong.
Yeah, and how wrong do we feel like we are? How real do we feel like this team is? Currently in the standings, they are
in second
place, between second and 11th. Which side do you think they are closer to?
I think they're still closer to 11th than they are to second. I mean, no team has a bigger swing between their points and expected points totals or their goal differential minus expected goal differential than San Diego does. They are getting a lot of attention for a lot of the attacking wrinkles that they have made to the squad, which we've talked about on the show in the past. And yet they are not producing nearly the level of chance quality that relative to the actual number of goals that they are scoring. And so I don't quite know how that can last, even though, Delphine Cascarino up to this season has been probably the best player on pure talent that they have in the roster. Gia Corley has had a breakout. Kenza Dali in possession doesn't look like the player she's been for the last couple of years in a good way. So it seems like on paper, the actual raw goals totals that they have run up are the truth. But it's hard for me to shake that, like, below the surface, that they're not actually getting a lot of good chances in aggregate.
They've also farmed some of the bottom teams in the league, and the 2 games they've played against Orlando and Kansas City, they've lost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They seem kind of like the gatekeeper team. Like, they beat the teams they're supposed to beat. They can't beat the really good teams.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes them a little more real for me is just their defensive quality. So I guess the question for you guys is, given the points already on the board, is San Diego a playoff team?
Probably.
They'd have to screw up pretty bad to not at least hold on to 8th, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're in an even better position now than Chicago was at this point in the season last year, and Chicago still snuck in after falling apart in the second half of the season. So, yeah, I think the wheels would really have to come off for them to not at least grab 8th.
A flawed but better team than I think any of us thought they were, and maybe right on the button for where ASA's model had it.
I wonder if that just comes down to, Jonas Shadoval had a reputation when he was at Arsenal for being a very, like, structured attacking coach, like always wanting to make sure every attacking player is in one spot that they're supposed to be at any time on the field. And the way that I've sort of read San Diego's performances, especially in the last 3 or 4 weeks, is he seems to be really focusing on getting the defensive shape right and making sure that they're tighter out of possession and maybe waiting for the attack to figure itself out. Like you say, Eric, an individual brilliance, Gia Corley's job is to basically just float into any pocket of space that she can find room in. That's not a rigid, like, number 10 having to be at X when everyone else is at Y or Z coordinates. So yeah, I mean, if that's enough to get you into playoffs, if you have a defense that is like that organized and that good.
So I think they've focused on shape over everything else because they have to, given their personnel.
For sure.
I think if you're going to play with Savannah McCaskill and Kenza Dali as a double pivot in midfield, you really cannot get sucked into a transitional game. Those are, 2 players who are good positionally and who are good on the ball. They're going to help you keep possession, and Dali's been incredible, advancing the ball and making plays in the final third as well. But you don't want to get into a track meet transitional game with those 2 in the center of your midfield. You're not going to have a good time. And I think they've been pretty smart about making sure those 2 are kind of, in shape, deep in position, and the fullbacks get forward a little bit more while those 2 sit. And I think, Moroni more so than Lundqvist, and it's working really well. Everything just seems to make sense for their personnel. I think Eideval's done a good job adapting to what he has.
And you also don't want to expose your central defensive pair, which is comprised of a 17-year-old kid and some rotation of Kristen McNabb and Kennedy Wesley, who, Wesley did not impress last season, and McNabb is on the wrong side of 30 and hasn't played center back all that much in recent seasons. So to give them, very specific, sort of tactical structural instructions might allow for fewer gaps to get exposed in the most dangerous parts of the field. So it's working. I mean, for, Kim, you even sold us the idea that rookie center backs in the NWSL just should be allowed to take a flyer until they get more experience. But like, what have you made of Armstrong? Trinity Armstrong at this point in the season.
I mean, I'm pretty stunned at how good she is.
Yeah, it's remarkable. To be honest,
looks very,
for 17 years old,
she looks very composed. She looks very professional. There's none of that, silly rookie mistakes that you see from even, 22-year-olds who were, in the College Cup finals. Like, if I was not familiar with her before the season and just watched them, and somebody asked me what do you think of that player? How old do you think she is? How experienced do you think she is? I would never in a million years guess that she was a teenager.
In terms of net receiving, San Diego only has one player with our threshold of minutes with a positive net receiving.
Yeah.
So I worry about their ability to continue making chances. I worry about Kimi Ascanio's XG, which looks good really right now, but she's only getting 3 box touches per 90.
And she's a kid too.
I think the only thing I worry about is like the weight of expectations that a lot of these kids have had thrust upon them based on good early season results and how repeatable. I think Trinity Armstrong's just like the real deal, but I am less sold on many other pieces in the team. Even McCaskill's numbers are sort of like returning to a McCaskill-like level now 9 games into the season.
Yeah. She's
where
just,
like
she's
the
just
revelation
not playing
of,
higher up the field where that would be more dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it feels like 17 points right now. 8th place is 12 points, 8th, 9th. Look, they could drop out, but I kind of feel like a third of the way through the year, they're in better position than they could have hoped for.
And the Larner Elo model actually thinks they're closer to 2nd than 11th. They have them pegged for 5th going for the rest of the year. So who knows?
Yeah, they're an interesting case. I wonder if ASA's model didn't just get it right preseason.
We'll find out.
We'll see.
One last thing on San Diego, and we could do this about any team, right? This is total speculation, but when it comes to summer transfers, obviously every team's going to try to make changes, but San Diego, I think in the offseason was in kind of a unique situation where because of all of the turmoil and turnover that they had, maybe they were not an attractive destination for people. Maybe, people, foreign players looking to transfer into NWSL were looking at San Diego thinking, I'll give it a year, I'll give it a window. I'm not sure I want to get into that. Now that they look like a stable team with the stable structure performing well, I don't think they're going to have any problem attracting talent during the summer. And they should theoretically have the budget to do that. And I think they have a pretty clear need. It's up top. This team needs a striker, and I think they're going to find one.
Yeah.
Buckle up, summer window. All right. Who's next?
Next on our preseason ranking is a team that, Evan, you and I both placed 10th. Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as I begrudgingly admire the way that they are just anti-footballing out results, I think 10th is like pretty bang on for where I sort of expect them. This feels like very real.
Yeah, they're 11th on expected points. They're 11th on XG differential. Their actual like underlying defensive performance is like mid-table rather than top table. And in fact, the non-penalty goals that they've allowed, period, is mid-table rather than top of the table. So you pair that with a non-existent offense. I do not know how you continue to like eke out miserable 1-0 wins and maintain a 6th place position. That seems very unrealistic.
Kim, where are you on Seattle?
I struggle to be objective about this team because of how miserable it is to watch them and how much I hate watching their games.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that, man, there's more than one way to play soccer. I don't think that my favorite way is the correct way. But does anybody like watching this team? Is there a single human being on earth who's like, man, I just absolutely love the Seattle Reign style of play. It is so entertaining to me.
Well, and if you're gonna catenaccio games into dust, at the very least, you've actually got to be defensively superlative. That's the only way that it can sustain. And if you're not that, then you're just dross. You're absolute dross. And that's sort of where they're at right now.
And you can't tell me that like this team doesn't have the attacking talent to be a bit more ambitious. I know you guys have talked about Haitama and how, disappointing her performances have been on this show. She's probably, I think we can say at this point, not ever going to become the goal scoring dynamo number 9, but they have Lynn Biondolo, they have Maddie Darlene, Sam Meza has emerged as a pretty solid playmaker given their style of play. I know her numbers aren't off the charts or anything, but relative to the way they're trying to play, her creative output is pretty good.
Yeah.
And I think they have the defensive and goalkeeping talent behind them to believe that they're not going to concede a bunch of goals if they open up a little bit.
Yeah.
There is a fear that just, I think, was struck in Laura Harvey, maybe at the tail end of Seattle 1.0 or her time in Utah, that she's just never been able to shake. And she kind of got rewarded for it those first 2 full seasons when she came back, right? Won a Shield and then got to a championship game the year later. So it's almost becoming pathologized in her mind that this is the only way that she can function, especially knowing that the purse strings have yet to be fully opened under this new leadership.
They've turned Lynn Biondolo into a negative 0.11 G+ player.
Yeah.
She's an anti, Haitama's negative 0.16. They have, the anti-football that they are playing has so thoroughly neutered their attack and their ability to create. It's not different than it's not that much different than what we were saying with Houston a minute ago, except Houston doesn't have nearly the weapons, theoretically, that Seattle have.
The Biondolo thing is incredible. And I open it up to the both of you as to what you think. She is deeply below average on XG per 96, and I don't think that's ever happened in her career before. And do we only chalk this up to tactics, or do we chalk this up, at least to some degree, to her? What have you guys seen out of her specifically that might not be solely answered by Laura Harvey?
I think if it was more about her and having some kind of physical decline or poor attitude or tactical acuity, she wouldn't be getting on the pitch.
Yeah, it's about the tactics. It's about where she's being deployed. And it's about what Seattle does the minute they have a lead. I mean, they score, they shut up shop. What did they just do last weekend? They scored
the 39th minute, and then I don't believe they took a shot after that.
No.
Miserable watch.
Yeah.
And again, I think the thing that's crucial here is, so we have them 10th preseason. They're 6th in the table. I don't think there's that big a margin between 6th and 10th.
Right.
There's almost zero margin between 6th and 10th. So
to say that they are really the team we have at 10th, or had at 10th preseason, I think is basically correct. They just happen to be 6th on points right now because they've had some real luck.
Yeah.
They've scored 8 goals in 9 games.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's bone chilling to hear that. But yes, I think Eric, to your point, we've also seen just over the past 3 or 4 weeks how much yo-yoing up and down the table has been occurring because of the way of how tight things in the middle are. So if they slide, I would not be surprised at all. So is 6th place real? No, it is not real.
But it's kind of real because 10th place is not that much different. It's real only in that sense. All right, let's move on. Let's go to Louisville, a team I'm really excited for all of us to sort of jump in on. I had them accidentally preseason 9th. I really tried not to do that, to leave them in 9th again. But with all the Portland injuries, that's where they ended up. Evan intentionally tried to have them in 9th. They ended up in 8th because of the Portland injuries. Kim, how did you see them preseason?
Pretty much the same way. I thought that they had maybe a higher ceiling than that, but the injuries and other absences that they've had have really dragged them down. And I think they're actually doing a decent job overcoming the selection issues that they have.
They're 5th on expected points?
Yeah. 3rd on XG differential. Yeah. The performances under the hood are actually pretty stellar.
So which is more real to you? Performances under the hood version of this team, or the currently sitting in 11th preseason ranked 9th team?
I mean, I think they're closer to the performances under the hood. I'm maybe not quite all the way there, but if you're asking which one's closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've just made, to Kim's point, they've solved some personnel issues through some of Bev Yanez's tactical rejiggering. Like, Eric, we've brought it up a couple times. Like, moving Kayla Fisher to the middle is hiding a lot of Kayla Fisher's problems, and making her the tip of the spear is allowing you to get Janine Sonis and Emma Sears on the field at the same time, allow them to do what they do, and feed and have a constant source of service to whom you can feed. And that has been, generally speaking, working. And then in terms of the back line, the only game I can think of where they really looked defensively dicey that had nothing to do with Katie Lund was the game where Taylor Flint wasn't in the match. Otherwise, everything not to do with Katie Lund has looked really, really sharp defensively. And now with Lund finally, whether it's Lund finally admitting the seriousness of her injury or the club finally admitting the seriousness of her injury, in the tiniest, noisiest of samples, Jordan Bloomer is finally making sure that goals that should be kept out of the net are actually kept out of the net. And things have turned positively in their direction ever since, despite the bad, annoying loss to the loss to Seattle. They're looking good. And yet somehow I still don't believe in them. And maybe that's a me thing. Maybe that's a 9th place curse thing. But I'm just sort of kind of waiting patiently for the other shoe to drop.
I mean, Savannah DeMello looks back. She's currently 12th in the league in non-penalty XG plus XA per 96. She's dangerous. Kayla Fisher gets herself squared up in the right spots. Emma Sears is a menace. Taylor Flint is an excellent midfielder. And if they have all of these pieces healthy, I think they can look a lot more like their underlying numbers. I worry about their depth and their ability to account for the loss of any of these people. And I also, unlike other teams where we can sort of squint and see them potentially making moves in summer, I think we would be naive to think that Louisville's got like a big move in them that like shores things up, which I think really does limit stuff.
This is not to be disrespectful to the club or the city, but just thinking realistically, when trying to recruit talent from outside of the United States, it is considerably easier to recruit foreign talent to San Diego than it is to Louisville. Yeah. That is just simply a fact. So, when we talk about like some of these teams are going to make big splashes in the summer, if you are San Diego or Angel City or Bay or Gotham, it is quite a bit easier to do that than it is at Louisville. But I think Louisville has already survived some of these big blows that we didn't know if they could survive pretty well. You talked about Fisher. I thought that when Bethany Balcer announced that she wouldn't be playing, that it was going to be a big problem for them, and they've managed to survive that. When Ari Borges was injured, I didn't think they could get past that. Katie O'Kane has been surprisingly very good in midfield. And then, Katie Lund has previously been an excellent player for them, was struggling while playing hurt, and Jordan Bloomer stepped in and played very well in the last couple of games. So while I would have shared your concerns about their depth, a couple months ago, they're already kind of proving that they can overcome some of these things.
You're not wrong about that.
And they beat Gotham a couple weeks ago. So, despite the loss to Washington earlier in the season, at the very least, they've been able to hang when needed against bigger sides. So I definitely think that it's a me problem, that I'm still somehow not convinced by this group, even though all the evidence that we have suggests that they are on a playoff pace at the very least.
Such a journey for you, Evan, going from putting...
Based on where I was in 2023, I know.
Yeah, putting 4 or 5 of their players on your best 11 in 2023.
I don't want to get hurt again.
Yeah, no, I get it. I worry about Louisville in the points on the board. They've played really well. They haven't put the points on the board yet.
Yeah.
And if they do regress to something that is a little less good than this, they aren't doing it with points to squander available to them.
Yeah, 4 losses in 9 games is a big part.
This is just another year where, like, I look at this Louisville team, I'm like, you're better than what is currently being recorded. How is this not going to work out for you? All right, let's move on and talk Angel City. My preseason 8th, Evan's preseason 9th. Kim, we won't ask you what you think as a former Angel City person. You could be spared that, unless you'd like to let us know where you thought they were before the season.
I mean, I have to admit that it is difficult for me to be objective about Angel City, given that I had some hand in, acquiring some of the players that still play for the team.
Sure,
I think that's a reasonable position to take.
That is exactly the position. It's why I did not ask. ASA had Angel City preseason, and I remember thinking this was shocking at the time. They had them 6th.
And where are they in the table right now?
They are in 7th.
Tied for 6th on points per game.
But where do you think they are? Are they more this 9-10 cuspy playoff team? Are they not even that real? Are they more like a solidly middle of the road playoff team? Where do you guys see them? I think we're not that far off.
I mean, their defense stinks.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe I'm exaggerating that a little bit. I mean, their defense is not good, and it is demonstrating so many of the same problems that it has always demonstrated in dropping points. I mean, there were circumstances that suggested maybe they weren't as bad as the 2-0 loss to Bay last weekend. But in aggregate, they still demonstrate defensive frailties. I mean, I think I was looking at just their defensive performance via G+, like in the box. I think they were like 13th in the league right now. They are another team that like clearly has chosen their pressing triggers in a very specific band at the top of the middle third, because they're 12th on G+ allowed in the final third, but they're 4th in G+ allowed in the attacking half. But like always, they played really open, really chaotic games that lead to 4-3 scorelines sometimes, because, if you are getting up in teams' faces in the attacking third, failing at that, but able to drop back and hit a pressing trigger in the attacking half, that doesn't tell me that there's like a lot of consistency in their defensive organization. And so I'm not really buying that, like, their attack, which has generally been pretty strong, is enough to get them over the hump because of just how wobbly the defense is. Like, I feel they're much closer to 10th than they are to 6th.
I understand the way that they're playing theoretically. Like, it makes sense that if you have fullbacks who are very talented attacking players, you have center backs whose main attribute is that they are very fast. You would want to play a very attacking style and kind of take some risks that you can cut out the bad stuff that you're going to give up in attacking transition as a result of getting a lot of numbers forward and pressing high and getting those fullbacks up into attack. In practice, their center backs have not quite been good enough to deal with that style of play. And I guess the question I'd ask of both of you, because I'm not sure I know the answer, is the problem that style of play? Like, would their center backs look better in if they were playing just like a standard 4-2-3-1 mid block?
No, Kim, the problem is that they haven't given Kristen Press enough minutes. Don't you know that? Haven't you heard?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Please do not suck me into this.
No, I think the problem here actually doesn't have that much to do with the center backs as much as it has to do with the fact that Alana Kennedy and Katie Zellum are woefully incapable of covering in that secondary piece out of the center of midfield, and that they have just a giant gap between the lines there that gets them in a lot of trouble and ends up with their center backs really out of position because that third or fourth covering piece isn't there to stop transition going the other direction. I know the vision was to play Alana Kennedy as a 6. I think that it is not a good idea. And I've been on record saying I don't think it's a good idea for a while, and I'm not really changing my tune there. I've been surprised that Katie Zellum's numbers have also not necessarily been good. So is it the center backs? No, I feel like it's more the whole defensive shape and the whole defensive approach to this. As fun as it is to watch a team that like wants to engage in the opposite of what Houston's doing and just let high variance games, we're going to create a lot of chances. You're going to create a lot of chances. It's going to be up and down. We think our weapons are better than your weapons. I think that their weapons are like, other than Alyssa Thompson, not better than a lot of other teams' weapons. And Alyssa Thompson, who is third in net G plus in the league this year and really having a breakout season, kind of doesn't have the component pieces around her for there to be a sustainable attack that like this defensive approach. They're just too open. If they start losing some of these variance battles more decisively, I think this is a team that's like on the cusp of a precipitous fall because of the way they've set themselves up.
And I have a theory that maybe part of that comes in, I think there's a way to maybe tie all of this together, which is, say, for example, a player like Riley Tiernan, who has gotten a lot of Rookie of the Year buzz. And again, her highlight reel looks great because there's a lot of goals involved. But her off-ball movement when Angel City are attacking is just chaotic. Like, I don't have any sense of like what the plan is in terms of her off-ball runs. And if, say, Claire Emsley or Katie Zellum or Kennedy Fuller is looking to like make an outlet pass to her or to try and like break lines on a through ball with her running in behind, and if she doesn't receive it, all of a sudden the rest of the squad is so out of shape and so spaced out that it's not difficult to punch through the middle of it. And that's just but one example of how the lack of coordination outside of whatever Thompson's able to do individually has led to led to extremely high variance. Like, you just never know what you're going to get with this group.
It's kind of funny that this is like forever the Angel City story, except for the like 3 games where Julie Ertz was good. Like the whole other history of the team is this.
It is the Angel City way through and through.
To really come back to it, Kim, I think Sarah Gordon and Savvy King is a nice center back pairing. Who knows when we'll see Savvy King again? And we don't need to belabor the point, but what a boner from the league. That said, if it forces Alana Kennedy into a center back role for a period of time, and if it forces Katie Zellum to start at the 6, I think that they may back into a solution that is slightly better.
There are a lot of downstream effects to that, of course, because it might involve Madison Hammond getting more minutes, and
almost certainly,
irrespective of any of that, like we already have one data point suggesting that Kennedy is not going to move into the back line because Megan Reed started against Bay over the weekend, and nobody needs that.
Look, right now they are the 4th luckiest team when it comes to points minus expected points. And 4th luckiest team while being 7th in the standings makes me think you are less of a playoff team in my mind right now than Louisville is.
Yeah. For me, they are definitely not real.
Yeah. Kim?
Yeah, I definitely lean towards not real because it's difficult to see this defensive unit improving given the current circumstances. You know, not that we want to spend too much time speculating about Savvy King's health, but, you know, she's a really young, talented player who, you know, before she had this health problem was, you know, showing some signs of improving. Maybe she was inconsistent, but clearly a talented young player who had some upside. And now we don't know when she's going to resume her career, if she's going to resume her career. And that's a pretty significant blow to Angel City on the field. Not that anyone like particularly cares, like everyone just wants her to be healthy. But, you know, if we're talking about what's happening to this team on the field, there was a case for this backline has upside and could improve. And now it's very difficult to see that happening.
Bon chance. Yeah. Our local.
Yeah. You're not wrong.
Much like last year, this will be a 2-parter, I think.
For sure.
Yeah, have fun editing this.
You can read Kim over at The Guardian and follow her at Kimmy Schilling on social media. Kim McCauley, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Yeah, thank you.
Join our Patreon if you haven't done so already. $6 a month or $60 a year gets you 4 bonus episodes every single month, as well as access to our Discord server and invitations to our semi-regular YouTube live streams. Rate us 5 stars, drop a nice review in your podcatcher of choice. Follow us and tell all your friends about us as well. And be sure to follow us on social media at XOwnGoals. That's the letter X, Own Goals. And if you believe we've made an own goal, email us at expectedowngoals@gmail.com. That's the letter expectedowngoals@gmail.com. Talk to you on Patreon on Thursday. Keep your ears open for part 2 later this week of NWSL Heat Check.